In the 2015 college football season, we witnessed a lot of talent at the running back position. Guys like Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley were putting on display the abilities that they possessed every weekend. However, among these guys, there were no doubt two backs that had two Heisman-worthy seasons, yet only one of them came away with the trophy. Those two guys were Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. As most of y'all know, Derrick Henry did indeed win the Heisman that season after a great Heisman-worthy season. The thing is that Christian McCaffrey as well put together a Heisman-worthy year, yet did not come away with the hardware because at the end of the day, there is only one trophy. In this video, we will go over each of their performances in that 2015 season and see who was most productive and most valuable to their team, which will help us decide who should have truly won that award. So let's get into it. So we'll start with Derrick Henry and then move to Christian McCaffrey. And I feel that the most notable aspect of these two players that I should first mention is that they are two very different athletes. Right? One guy is a 6'3", 245-pound monster who, when he gains speed, is pretty much impossible to stop. The other is a small, shifty back who can catch and is a force on special teams. And with that in mind, the question we'll be discussing is which is most valuable. Like I said before, Derrick Henry was almost impossible to stop once he got going and is what we call a downhill runner. The offensive coordinator for Alabama at the time, Lane Kiffin, saw this and, like any good offensive coordinator, fed the crap out of this man. When the season was all said and done, Derrick Henry had rushed the ball 395 times, which is the fifth most all time. With all of these carries, he was able to put up pretty insane rushing numbers. In the 15 games he played in during that season, he had over 100 yards 9 times, and 4 of those were 200-plus yard rushing performances. All of the games gave him a total of 2,219 yards on the season, and along with that, he had 28 touchdowns. Now, here's the thing. Derrick was an absolute force in the rushing game only, unlike Christian, who produced in the rushing, receiving, and return game. And for a lot of people, that could be the deciding factor, which is valid. But what's impressive for me in Derrick's situation is that week after week, these SEC defenses knew exactly what was going to happen. They knew that they weren't going to be throwing screens or swing passes to this man, which meant that they were going into these games selling out for the run and still could not stop him. Yes, Christian McCaffrey is an extremely versatile athlete, which is scary for any defense. When that is the case, it also prevents the defense from preparing for just one strength. And I say that not to knock Christian McCaffrey, that is absolutely a strength for any player. My point is that the SEC defenses Derrick was going up against, with a week of preparation, still could not stop him, even though they knew exactly what was going to happen. You also got to remember that Derrick was playing in the SEC while Christian was playing in the Pac-12, which is a much more difficult conference to be productive in. In the 15 games for the Crimson Tide, 9 opponents were ranked and 5 of those were in the top 10. So it was no doubt a difficult road to those 2,200 yards during that season. So when we look at the fact that Derrick Henry kind of only had one strength, which was his running game, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The analogy that I see in my head are two guys in the NBA, with Derrick being a big man who has mastered the hook shot, so all the team does is just feed him, and it's an automatic bucket. And then Christian is a small, shifty point guard who is just as good at scoring, but, has to shoot, drive, and create space to do so. Alright, so now we'll move on to Christian McCaffrey, and his numbers speak for themselves. No matter what way you look at it, numbers don't lie, and Christian McCaffrey had one of the most statistically phenomenal seasons we have ever seen. I've already mentioned in this video that he was a monster in the rushing, receiving, and return game, and this will show you just how true that is. At the conclusion of the season, he ended with over 2,000 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns, which for any running back is already a fantastic year, but with that, he added 645 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, which gave him a whopping 2,664 yards from scrimmage. But even on top of that, he added another 1,000 kick return yards and 100 punt return yards with a total of 2 return touchdowns. To break it down by games, Stanford played 14 games that year, and in 11 of those, he had over 100 yards, with 3 of those games being over 200 yards. Also, those 8 rushing touchdowns he had on the whole season, half of them were in one game versus UCLA when he had 243 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. So as we can see, numbers-wise, Christian clearly had a step up on Derrick, but don't let this blind you to the reason that Derrick Henry ultimately took home the trophy that year, which was arguably his greatest attribute, his size. With everything that Christian McCaffrey was, one thing he wasn't was a 6'3", 245-pound monster that was able to run a 4.54 40-yard dash, which, by the way, was only half a second slower than Christian himself. So even though Christian was extremely productive yardage-wise, he only had 13 touchdowns, rushing and receiving combined, compared to Derrick, who had over double that in just the rushing game. With that in mind, the question I find myself asking is whether I value yards or touchdowns more, and to be honest, Christian's performance was more impressive and more Heisman worthy to me. So when we look at these two great athletes and their incredible year, we see 2 Heisman seasons. There's no doubt about that. It's just unfortunate for one of these athletes that the other had their great season in the same year. Because there are definitely seasons within the last 10 years that if Christian had put up these numbers in, he would have been the unanimous winner. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. These are 2 guys that bring such different things to the table that it's hard to compare them and see which is more valuable to success on the football field. In my opinion, Christian did deserve the trophy more just because his level of productivity was more impactful for his team, even though Derrick Henry got into the end zone more than twice as much as he did. When you have an elite running back, receiver, and return specialist in one dude, to me, there's almost nothing more valuable in terms of offensive production. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and share it, as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.